In this lesson, I want to show you an example of how absolute references can lead to a macro not functioning as expected. So let's begin by creating a sample data set. I'm just going to do a column of regular numbers. So I'll begin with a number 1 in A1, a number 2 in A2. I'm going to select both of these values and just drag them down, let's say to row number 24. All right, so we have a list of numbers. Now what I'm going to do is to delete every fifth row, so every fifth value rather. So I'm going to click on number 5, let's delete number 5, number 10, number 15, and number 20. Let's say this represents a collection of 5 different data sets. We have a spreadsheet, let's imagine it's much bigger than this, that just has a collection of data every 4 rows and then a blank line. And our goal is to remove every one of those blank lines step by step. The goal of this macro is for us to click into the top cell of any 4 cells that have data, so maybe number 1 or number 6 or maybe number 11, and have a macro that when executed moves 4 rows down and deletes the row that is blank, which is always going to be 4 down from where we're starting, right? So I want to be able to click into, let's say 6 right now, run the macro, have this row be deleted, click into, let's say 16 right here, run this macro and have row 20 be deleted, focus on the row that is 4 down from where we're starting and just delete that row entirely. Let's see what happens when we record a macro to do this with absolute references and then with relative references. So I'll click into cell A1, let's click record macro. Let's call our macro here absolute delete. Absolute references are enabled by default, so we can click OK. First thing I'm going to do here is to right click on row number 5, click delete, then put my cursor back into cell A1 and finally stop recording. Pretty simple macro. Right here in my modules folder in my Visual Basic Editor, I'll have a module 1 module. Let's open that. And here we see the automatically generated macro. In fact, let me go ahead and delete these comments so we can read it a little bit easier. So we can take a look at what's going on here. 3 lines, pretty simple. First step is we're selecting row number 5. And this actually is going to be where our problem is going to occur, because we can see that row number 5 is absolutely referenced. It's explicitly written down that it's row number 5. So no matter where we run this macro from moving forward, if we, for example, want to run this macro right here on row 15, what's actually going to happen is the first line is automatically going to select a row number 5, this one. And the next line of code is with the selection, which represents our row, we're going to delete it and shift all of these cells up. This is where everything is going to go wrong, because rather than deleting the 5th row below from where we're starting, we're automatically going to delete row number 5. So for example, let's say I start right here in cell A5, and I think I'm going to delete this row below, row number 9. When I execute this macro by going to macros, finding this absolute delete macro, clicking run, well, we can see things don't go as expected. We actually lose a value. That value is number 6. It's now completely gone. It was in the position of row number 5. It's been deleted. It's now lost. Our macro isn't working as expected because of absolute references. So this is how absolute references can lead us astray. So now let's take a look at how we can fix this problem using relative references. The first thing I want to do is to bring our data back into its original shape. So I'm going to highlight all of the values below. Let's once again create a little bit of a longer data set right here. So let's just drag it down to row 24. Let's delete lines 5. Let's do row 10, row 15, and row 20, all of the 5s. Once again, let's place our cursor in cell A1. The thing I want to do here, of course, is to enable relative references. So I have to click this button again. It's on the developer tab on the code group on the left. Now we can record our macro. So let's click record macro. That brings up the record macro dialog box. Let's call this macro relative delete. Once again, no shortcut, no description, doesn't matter for now. As soon as I click OK, everything is being recorded, so we have to be very careful with all of our steps. I'm going to repeat the exact same steps that I did last time. Right click on row number 5, click delete, click back into cell A1. Let's stop recording the macro. All right, so there's our code on the right side. Let me go ahead and once again remove the comments. Let me also scroll up so we can see the difference between what's going on here. So as a reminder, the syntax here is not incredibly important. I know that this is a lot of code to take in, so it doesn't really matter if everything is understandable. We can take a look at the difference between these two macros above and below each other. In the absolute macro, we're selecting row number 5 all the time. Here you can see what we're doing is where we have the active cell, which represents the cell that's currently selected or active on our spreadsheet, we're moving down 4 rows. That's what offset does. You don't have to memorize this right now because we're going to dive into it much later. But essentially what we're doing here is no matter where we are in the spreadsheet, we're moving 4 rows down dynamically from that cell. That cell could be anywhere. It can be cell A1, it could be cell G7, it can be cell Z26. It doesn't matter. We're moving 4 rows down. We're selecting that entire row. We can see that with entire row right here. And that selection is what's actually being deleted. You can see selection delete with the shift right here, XL up, is the exact same line as we have right here. So the deletion step is exactly the same. The difference is in what is actually being selected for deletion. In the absolute macro, it's always row number 5. In this one, it's a relative row. It's the row that is 4 down from where our original cell is, which is exactly what we want. It's relative to where we're starting from. So now, if I click into cell A5, that's the top of a code block or a data block to be more precise. And now I want to delete row number 9 because it's 4 down from where I'm starting. If I go to macros and I execute relative delete, let's click this. Everything works as expected. I've deleted the row that is 4 down from where I'm starting from. So now if I click into this cell, again, that's the top of my next block of data. Once again, go into macros. Once again, execute relative delete. We click run. The next one is deleted. One more time, we're going to click into cell A13. That's the beginning of the next block of 4. Let's go into macros, relative delete, run. Everything is working exactly as expected. And if we, of course, had a keyboard shortcut, we can just hold it in place, and that would execute this over and over and over and delete every 5th row automatically. So hopefully this lesson will serve to reinforce the idea of how relative references work. They are relative or based off of where you're starting from. They're dynamically created. Where we're starting from, that cell is used as the basis for figuring out where you're going. So all sequences of movement, whether you're moving up or down or left or right, are interpreted as being relative to that starting point, that starting cell. In comparison with absolute references, everything is absolute. So if you go into cell C3, VBA will look into that as literally cell C3 every single time. In this example, Excel interpreted our deletion of row number 5 as the deletion of row explicitly number 5, specifically row number 5. Not the row that was 4 below where we started from, that's relative, but actually explicitly row number 5. That's what absolute references do. It's absolute, it's predetermined. You can think about what the word absolute means. It means kind of fixed in place. That's exactly how these references work. They're always targeting the exact same location, the same cell, the same column, the same row, etc. Relative references, which is going to be the one you tend to use more often than not whenever you're recording macros, targets things dynamically, which makes it a much more powerful and flexible choice when recording macros.